Welcome back to the Radiant You podcast. I'm your host, Lissa Cole, and today we're stepping into chapters 7 and 8 of the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. Chapters that will transform the way you hold emotional reactions, navigate tension, and create boundaries with grace. Before we begin, take a breath and settle wherever you are. If you're at home, grab your book, your Radiant You workbook, your journal, maybe something warm to drink, coffee, tea, whatever brings comfort to your heart. And if you're driving or walking, simply let your breath soften and let this meet you where you are. Today's episode is all about exploring boundaries that breathe. Boundaries that hold your peace without hardening your heart. Boundaries that create space, not separation. Boundaries that allow you to stay grounded, compassionate, and connected, even when emotions run high. All right, let's begin. Last episode, we sat with the chapters 5 and 6, the fears around other people's opinions, the weight of family dynamics, and the deep compassion that emerges when we understand someone's frame of reference. We anchored into 3 truths. You cannot control someone else's thoughts. Let them think what they think. Family carries emotional history and emotional patterns, and understanding those patterns gives you space to respond differently. Your peace comes from your response, not from controlling their reaction. Let them create space. Let me brings you home. Those truths are the foundation of today's conversation, because today's chapters ask you to stay grounded in your truth, even when others lose theirs. Let's step into chapter 7. When grown-ups throw tantrums. Mel opens this chapter with a reality we see everywhere. Adults feel emotions as intensely as children, but many never learned how to regulate them. And on page 10, Mel's therapist gives her one of the most clarifying insights. It says, most adults are just 8-year-old children inside big bodies. Her therapist continues, the next time you're with this person and you feel triggered by something they say or do, imagine the 4th grade version of them standing in the room. Because what you're witnessing is not maturity. It's overwhelm, frustration, emotional reactivity that was never developed into emotional regulation. And when we see this clearly, something shifts. Our boundaries begin to breathe. They open just enough for empathy, but stay firm enough to keep us grounded. Mel writes that children require emotional co-regulation, but adults must learn emotional regulation. That's not your job. This is where the let them theory becomes powerful. Let them have their feelings. Let them work through their reactions. Let them be responsible for their choices. Your job is not to fix, soothe, or absorb an adult's emotional storm. And then Mel adds on page 111, she shares it's because adults at their core are just as emotional as children. The difference is they are better at hiding it most of the time. The let them theory doesn't make you more judgmental. It makes you more compassionate. Because suddenly you see This isn't personal. This isn't about you. This is someone without emotional tools, and compassion becomes possible without abandoning your boundaries. I want to remind you of what Mel says on page 111. Emotional maturity isn't something you're born with or that just happens. It's a skill that takes time, practice, and a desire to learn. We now have the let them theory to help respond with compassion, setting our boundaries, and stop letting other people's emotional immaturity run our life. And you're gonna need this tool, she says, because the connection between adults and childlike behavior is irrefutable. She goes on with an amazing chart on page 112. I'm not going to go through every bit of it, but please take some time to go through that chart. It compares child behavior to adult behavior. Remember, the reason why children act like this is because they cannot regulate their own emotions. They are still learning. She goes on and shares more about an example of a child trying to get a toy and throwing a fit in the aisleway. And I love her responses. At the very bottom of 113, this is huge to me. It says, and I need to make sure I am crystal clear, adults are 100% responsible for the emotional and physical needs of children. Children cannot give themselves the emotional and physical support that they need. She continues on page 114. It is your responsibility to help a child regulate their emotional responses in a healthy way. It is also your responsibility to teach a child that emotions are normal and how to process them. The next paragraph, I want you to read on your own. It is amazing. She does the research with Dr. Lissa, and it is just dynamic. Over on page 115, Mel says again, it's your responsibility to help a child create space to process their own range of emotions. But it is not your responsibility to manage another adult's emotional reactions. Let that land. Yes, you are to provide that for a child, but not for any adult. Whew. As she continues to do more research with this, she talks about childlike behavior, adult childlike behavior, and what needs to happen with that on page 115. On page 116, she says one more thing to understand is that it really has nothing to do with you. When someone gives you the silent treatment or has a reaction of any sort, it all stems from their own inability to understand their emotions or even their past demons. She continues, any time an adult acts like an 8-year-old child, let them. And believe me, this strategy is going to change your life. Here's the thing. Using the let them theory, you'll never again be the victim of someone else's emotional immaturity or emotional abuse, because you will know exactly what to do. It is never your job to manage another adult's emotions. Don't forget that. Your responsibility is to protect yourself from their emotional spiral and to see it for what it is, a person who has no idea how to handle or express their emotions in a healthy way. Let them go silent. Let them erupt. Let them play the victim. Let them sulk. Let me be the mature, wise and loving adult in this situation. Let me decide if I want to address this directly or not at all. Let me remind myself that managing other people's emotions is not my job. And then she continues down, and this is on page 117. Instead of expecting other people to change, demand the change of yourself. Hold yourself to a higher standard and stop allowing this type of emotional, immature behavior to be your responsibility to manage. I think the next page on 118 is something of an eye-opener. At the very beginning, she says, what do you do if you are realizing as you're reading this that there are times in your life when you're the one who's emotionally immature and you're the one who's acting like an 8-year-old? You get overwhelmed by your emotions. You sulk. You give the silent treatment. You rage text. You play the victim. You snap at other people. You make it about you. That line, you play the victim, that weighs heavy sometimes. She goes on to share, if you are having this realization, here is what I want you to say to you. You are not alone. You are not alone. She's had the same realization. I've had the same realization about myself. So pay attention to really where are all of your feelings coming from? Is it coming from you realizing that it might be you? Mel goes on to say that the let them theory has been monumental in helping me be more compassionate toward myself. You guys, right here, this is what we've been talking about before. Kristin Neff and her self-compassion work is so important. Please take a moment and do some research about Kristin Neff again. On page 119, Mel says, when you feel your emotions rising up, let them. Allow the anger, the frustration, the hurt, the disappointment, the sadness, the grief, the tears, and the feelings of failure to come up. Let them. And then let me not react. Don't reach for your phone. Don't turn on the TV. Don't make a drink. Don't open the fridge. And for crying out loud, she says, don't text anyone. Here's the key line. Just notice. Notice the feelings and let them rise. Let them rise up. The reason why you must learn how to let them rise is that once they do, they also fall. Here's the thing. They only last about 90 seconds. Mel goes on to talk about the research that shows that emotions will rise up and they will fall away within 90 seconds if you don't react to them. If you breathe, if you pause, they will fall in 90 seconds. We can all take a pause for 90 seconds, right? We can all take a deep breath, several breaths, release for 90 seconds. You are human. You cannot control your emotions from rising up. Trying to is a waste of your time. And if you're pushing them down and pushing them down, you will volcano. You will erupt at some point. Breathe. So this is where the first radiant pillar comes alive. Rest and review. Pause. Notice your reaction. Observe the emotional energy without getting swept away. Ask yourself, Is this mine to carry? Is this reaction theirs? What does my peace need right now? This is the first breath of a boundary that breathes, one that lets you stay present without being pulled under. Now, we step into chapter 8. The right decision often feels wrong. And this chapter offers one of the deepest truths in the whole book. The right decision often feels wrong at first. Not because the decision is wrong, but because your body is not used to that feeling, that alignment yet. Mel explains that when you choose the boundary that protects your peace, you often feel fear, guilt, discomfort, doubt, pressure, uncertainty. Why? Because you're stepping out of old patterns. And your nervous system is wired for what's familiar, not what's healthy. On page 125, Mel writes, I find it helpful to remember Dr. Damore's framing that negative emotions are a mentally healthy response to life's upsets. People are allowed to be upset when you change your mind, and disappointed or brokenhearted when you break up. People are allowed to be depressed when they lose their job. So how do you do this? And how do you manage the excruciating level of guilt or discomfort you are going to feel when you make a hard decision that you know is right? That right decision for you. Mel says, what helped me is thinking about emotional discomfort like learning to ride a wave in the ocean. Because at their core, emotions are like waves. They rise, they fall. They are going to grieve the loss of what they thought would have been great. And then, slowly, as you let them feel whatever they need to feel, and you let yourself feel whatever you need to feel, and you don't try to control it or avoid it or change it, life has a way of going back to a new normal. Or going forward to a new normal. On page 126, she goes on to say, let me is the part where you remind yourself that this too shall pass. I have said that to myself for years. It's so amazing to see that in black and white print, just reaffirming to me that this too shall pass. It's the reminder that you are stronger than anyone else's emotional reaction. Let them have their opinions. Let them have their reactions. Let me have mine. Let your emotions rise up and give yourself the space to process your emotions too. She continues to say on page 126, never let anyone else's emotional reactions keep you from making the hard decisions. Let me be honest with myself and others. Let me do the hard things that's painful. Now, because it is the right thing to do and will save me from so much pain later. Let me give myself the opportunity to have the life I deserve. On page 126, she concludes with her 1, 2, and 3 numbers. 1 is problem. You're allowing other people's emotional immaturity to have power over your life. You're allowing someone else's outbursts, guilt trips, and reactions to dictate your actions, leading you to constantly manage their emotions rather than focusing on your own. This means you're always prioritizing the emotional needs of others at the expense of your own happiness. Now remember, we're talking about adult needs. Number 2 is truth. Other people's emotional reactions are not your responsibility to manage. You cannot control how others feel or respond, nor can you fix their emotional immaturity. Most adults have the emotional capacity of an 8-year-old, and you can't change that. Number 3 is solution. Using the let them theory, you can stay in control even when an adult is acting like a child. And having an emotional outburst, make the right decision for you, even if they make other people upset. You maintain the power when you stop taking on the burden of others' emotions and act in a way that aligns with your values. And this is the heart of boundaries that breathe. These are not rigid walls. They don't shut people out. They don't punish. They simply create space so your peace can expand. A breathing boundary says, I can stay connected to you without abandoning myself. I can care about you without carrying your emotions. I can love you deeply without losing my grounding. And this is where Mel brings us back to the second step. Let me. Let me choose the aligned decision. Let me honor my values. Let me follow what my soul is guiding me toward. Let me make choices I'm proud of, even when they feel uncomfortable. This is the courage of emotional maturity. Here, the second radiant pillar comes alive. Release and renew. Release the need to please, the fear of disapproval, the emotional weight someone else is carrying, the guilt of choosing what's right for you. Renew. Renew your grounding, your truth, your sense of direction, your willingness to step into courage. Boundaries that breathe are built on these 2 rhythms: release and renewal. This is where everything we've learned comes together. Rest and review helps you see what's happening with clarity. What emotion is yours? What isn't? And where your peace needs a boundary. Release and renew helps you let go of emotional responsibility for others and return to your own inner strength, wisdom, and grounding. Together, they form the foundation of your boundaries that breathe, boundaries that expand with compassion, boundaries that allow love to exist without losing yourself in the process. Boundaries are the space where respect and peace can live. Let's look at some reflection prompts for this week. Where am I trying to regulate someone else's emotional reaction? What boundary in my life needs space to breathe? Which decision feels uncomfortable but deeply right for me? Where can I add compassion without sacrificing my peace? What happens in my body when I stop absorbing someone else's chaos? I want you to think about this between now and the next time that we meet. I want you to choose one relationship or situation that often feels heavy. And before reacting, pause and ask, is this mine to manage? What does my peace need in this moment? How can this boundary breathe? Let them. And let me respond from my grounded truth. Say no once this week without apologizing or over explaining, the story background of it all. Just say no. Let peace, not guilt, guide your response. This simple pause or no can transform the entire dynamic of the situation or the relationship. It's that powerful. Thank you, radiant friends, for walking with me through chapters 7 and 8. The chapters that teach us how to hold peace in chaos, how to see emotional immaturity with compassion, and how to honor ourselves even when it feels uncomfortable. Boundaries that breathe allow you to care without carrying and love without losing yourself, and connect without collapsing, and even stay grounded when others are not. This is emotional maturity. This is freedom. This is radiance. Peace begins inside and radiates outward, always. You are beautifully radiant, free, and gracefully becoming who you are meant to be. Okay, I'll meet you right back here in our next episode of the book study of Mel Robbins The Let Them Theory, chapters 9 and 10, and my guided journey of radiance. So breathe in and breathe out. Let them and let you be radiant. Shine your light.